Hello YouTube, and welcome back to another episode on my channel, The Amateur Photographer. Today we are doing a review of two 50mm prime lenses for the Sony aps-c E-mount. I'm very excited about this as they have been popular and some of you requested a review on one of them. With that being said, before I start, I want to just talk a little bit about that 50mm focal length and why it's a unique one. For several reasons. I think the number one reason that makes it unique, it's its field of view. It is very commonly known in the photography world that 50mm focal length is very close to a human field of view, eye field of view that is. So a lot of people like to use it for street photography and things of that nature. Also portraits, they really make a good portraits. And if you have a sharp 50mm, meaning it has a maximum aperture of anywhere between 1.1 to 1.8, you could get a really nice bokeh background, which works out really well for portraits. The third thing about 50mm, it's affordability. Usually they run anywhere between $200 to $350 for the autofocus part. That's the one where the camera communicates with the camera electronically. It has a motor that helps with the focusing and that kind of stuff. The two lenses that I'm reviewing today, since they are manual lenses, they are both coming in under $200. So you get the point here. It's very affordable compared to other prime lenses out there. The last point I want to mention about the 50mm, it's lightweight. Because it doesn't require a lot of glass to make it sharp and to produce good images, it comes in really light. And if you compare it to other lenses like some of the zoom lenses out there or even other prime lenses, it is pretty lightweight. So when you're using a mirrorless camera, the point of a mirrorless camera is that you still have a very powerful camera but lightweight. That kind of goes away if you put a heavy lens on. So 50mm is always going to be that suitable weight. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started on our review today. Alright, so this is here. Just got them from Amazon. So I figured I record the unboxing from the beginning. Voila! The Kamlan 50mm. I'm really excited about this one. This is, I believe, the 1.1. And this one is still in another package. Zonlai 50mm. I believe this one is 1.4. Pretty fancy box. Nice red ribbon and their logo. All right, made of metal, so it's sturdy and feels pretty heavy in your hands. This is the bottom. Colors. Beautiful. It's metal, all metal. And this cover is also metal. I like this kind of stuff. It shows quality, at least that they care that the cover is not just a cheap one. Look at those colors on the front. Look at this wide aperture. Beautiful. Look at that. open and closed. Comes with a free. Alright. Now time to open the competitor. So this came wrapped around in foam, which also shows very nice packaging. So this is the cover, plastic cover, but it is with the Kamlan name on it. It does fit. This is a, alright, and I don't think that this comes off. Oh no, it does. Alright, so the cover comes off. Back also has a branded cover. Alright, look at this. Also some very nice color on the back of the lens. It's still metal mount. However, I think this one is it's painted black. It's not chrome, so it blends in with the body. This is here the aperture. So the focus ring on this one is at the opposite side of the second one. The focus ring goes all the way around, and the aperture ring has the same feel like the other one. It's stiff, it's declicked, and it goes around. Let's see here, you can see the front element, also pretty colorful. Opening up the aperture, see, there we go, beautiful. So let's start off by weighing the two lenses and see how they compare to each other. So with that said, that's the Kamlan coming in at 277 grams. And the Zonlai comes in at 202. So the Zonlai is about 25 grams or so less. So, alright, that's the Kamlan. Measuring in 9 ounce and 3/4 of an ounce. And the Zonlai is coming in at 7 1/8 of an ounce. So the Zonlai definitely wins as far as weight and being lighter than the Kamlan. All right. So examining the Kamlan lens, we see that the aperture ring is in the beginning closer to the camera body, followed by the focus ring. As far as the aperture ring, it's declicked, it's pretty smooth, and it goes from 1.1, the maximum aperture, to 16, the minimum aperture. It doesn't go full circle, as obviously it's not required. This is to control the aperture of the ring, of the lens. Take a quick look here. You could see it once we move this, the bottom ring. See that the aperture is being controlled. Nice smooth aperture, 1.1, so it's very wide, very noticeable. All right. Now next, moving on to the focus ring, and it's located on the outside, which is how I like it, because once you mount the lens on the camera and you set the aperture that you're looking for, then comes the focus, and that's when you're really gonna That's where you really need to make the adjustment. So the focus ring makes a full circle around the body of the lens, and it's also declicked, and it's pretty smooth and not too loose. So there is some pressure to it, which will make you feel the adjustment. Regardless of what you try to do, these will always move when you try to mount the lens on the camera, and I'll be showing you this right now. Now let's do the same thing to the other lens, the Zonlai. You have to forgive me, I know I'm slaughtering the name, but you know which one I'm talking about. This one, as I mentioned earlier, I like that straight barrel shape of it. This lens has the aperture ring and the focus ring transposed compared to the Kamlan. On this lens, they have the aperture ring on the outside while the focus ring is on the inside. I don't like this setup for the simple reason why most likely you will be holding the lens like this. And again, I'll show you when we mount it on the camera. So meanwhile, once you set up the aperture, most likely when you try to set the focus, you're gonna get confused and you're gonna start doing this stuff, and then you're gonna mess up the aperture, and then you have to re-expose the photo again. So that's one knock in my opinion on this lens. Nonetheless, again, both the focus ring and the aperture ring are declicked. Again, both have enough pressure that not to make it too loose moving around. Nonetheless, you still got to remember the fact that the aperture ring and the focus ring are on two opposite sides. As far as the focus ring, it does go all the way around the lens in full circle. However, you will notice that the lens does extend out in order for it to focus. So now when you do focus, manual focus, that is using these lenses, they do extend out. Now keep in mind, this is a prime lens, this is not a zoom lens. However, it is the nature of its physics that when you when you start focusing or using the focusing ring, that it will extend out, as you could see. So the true height of the lens, it's obviously its height while it's fully extended out. The same thing is true with the Kamlan. So examining the Kamlan, when you start focusing, as you could see, it extends out a bit. And now it's fully extended out. So to try to see the height, which is taller and which is shorter, I stacked them next to each other while they're fully extended out. And as you could see, the Zonlai, or then you know which one, this one is still shorter and smaller than the Kamlan. I believe also the barrels themselves are also smaller on the Zonlai than the Kamlan. Real easy test, you could tell. Zonlai again wins in the fact that it's smaller. Alright, so I wanted to cut here really quick just to clarify one thing that I noticed when I was editing my video. So I did mention that both of these have bigger barrels, and obviously the Zonlai lens is slimmer or has a smaller diameter barrel. This is the nature of the aperture though, folks. So I don't want you to think that I'm favoring one lens over another. This lens, the Zonlai, if I could pronounce it correctly, is coming in at 1.4 aperture, and the Kamlan is coming in at 1.1. Now, for those of you who don't know aperture, really quick, aperture, think of it this way. It's like this. You open it up, allows more light, and if you restrict it, less light, so your eye is seeing less of the image, or the image is not as clear. So you see, in order for you to open up the aperture, you need a bigger diameter as far as the barrel of the lens. So in order for you to achieve that, you gotta have a bigger barrel. So it's not necessarily a knock on the Kamlan lens, it's the nature of the beast, if you will. If you want 1.1 versus 1.4, it has to be a little bit bigger. Now back to our review. All right, now let's mount the lenses onto the camera. Here is my Sony a6300, and start off by the Kamlan. What I do like about the Kamlan also, which is something that I really suffer or struggle with non-Sony lenses, which is having the marker to align with the camera on the inside of the mount instead of being on the outside. I noticed that the Kamlan is the first manual lens that I am reviewing where they have the dot on the outside. So this becomes very easy to line with the camera. As such, goes in right away. You turn it and pretty straightforward. Because it has this bit of space between the aperture ring and the mount, I'm able to hold it from here and mount it a lot easier. We'll see right now that that's not the case with the Zonlai. It's not a big deal, but you gotta remember that taking it off or on, you are messing around with whatever ring that's closer to the camera body. All right. See this one right here, the Zonlai suffers from the same issue. They do have a marker, it is in the right spot, but it is on the inside. So you're constantly having to look to fiddle with it in order to line it up. Not a big deal, but the Sony native lenses all have the dot on the side of the lens. All right, so again, you go in there. As you could see, this one I don't have that much space like the Kamlan, but you still could get it in there. You just keep in mind that something is gonna move and you just have to adjust it. All right, examining it on the camera, smaller. Now let's take a look and see if any of these physical attributes contribute to the image quality and how sharp the image comes out. Let's take a look. Alright, so I ended up taking some pictures with both lenses of my sharpness chart, and the only thing that I did in Lightroom is take the sharpness down to 0. So for those of you who don't know, Lightroom automatically increases the sharpness of some images based on the type of camera. But so far I use about 3 different cameras, and Lightroom still always automatically increases the sharpness on each image that I import. So for this test, it doesn't make sense to keep the sharpness up. I just wanted to show you what the raw file, unedited, looks like coming directly out of the camera. All these images were shot with my Sony a6300, by the way, so keep that in mind. And take the last image here to 0, as you could see, and now let's start taking a look at it. It's actually pretty sharp at 1.1. I had to label the images because it's easily confusing. Because it's a manual lens, you may or may not know this, but manual lenses does not transmit any information to the raw file that comes out of the camera. As a result, you don't know what your aperture stop is. This will always be a challenge with most manual lenses, since there's no way for it to record the aperture value. So for this test, I labeled the chart before I shot the picture. At 1.1, as you could see, it's pretty sharp in the center. Going to the edges, it's kind of soft, but nonetheless, that's expected for a 1.1 lens. And that's when I zoom also, so keep that in mind. Otherwise, it looks pretty good. Going at 2.0. Of course, sharpness will increase. Still pretty sharp in the center. I'm going to the corners. Once again, it's sharper than the 1.1 in the corners, but that's when I zoom in, so keep that in mind. 2.8, obviously sharper. Center. and sharper on the edges as well. You really get the full sharpness though at the 5.6. I usually have a pretty good experience with that aperture value 5.6, especially when you're not looking for a shallow depth of field and looking at be sharp edge to edge, that is. On the edges, as you could see, it's pretty sharp. Let me see if I could correct the chromatic aberration and see if there's any. Sometimes I can't see it with my own naked eye, so what I do is I go and I correct for it and try to see if there was any improvement or any change. So no chromatic aberration that I could detect, which means it's pretty good. Alright, now switching over to the Zonlai sharpness test and looking at the images coming directly out of the camera using the Zonlai lens. Let me go ahead and get the sharpness back to where it is, or at least check to see if the software auto-corrected anything. Yep, sure did. Let's Alright, so now looking at the 1.4, and right away I'm noticing that the corners are a lot softer when compared to the Kamlan. Even the center here, I mean, while you could see all the details in the borders, you still could easily tell that it's soft with the naked eye. Corners are pretty soft. I want to go ahead and compare it to the Kamlan. I'm hesitant just because it's a 1.4 versus 1.1. So looking at the Kamlan at the max aperture of 1.1 versus the Zonlai at the max aperture of 1.4. So as you could see, Zonlai is really soft when compared to the Kamlan at the max aperture. Now I do realize that there is difference in aperture stops here, but nonetheless each one of them should be able to produce its own image with its own quality on its own at the maximum aperture. So nonetheless you could see that when compared to the Kamlan is definitely a lot sharper at the max aperture. Let's take a quick look here at the corners. As you can see, once again, definitely the Kamlan wins. By the way, I shot both of these pictures. All the sharpness tests were shot using a tripod, so there's no shakiness from my hand or anything like that, because the Sony a6300 has no in-body image stabilization, so that's why I use a tripod. Alright, now let's move on to the next one. Alright, now we're looking at two images for the Zonlai and the Kamlan at f2.0. So these are exactly equal. Once again, while the white comes out darker with the Kamlan, but you could see a lot more definition and a lot more sharpness. Moving to the corners, same deal. Now let's take a look at the f.6 on both. I would say the center are equal at 5.6. I still like the white coming out of the Zonlai. However, the sharpness coming out of the Kamlan is definitely a lot more noticeable. At 5.6, I don't think that there should be any softness with the Zonlai. So that's why I'm definitely favoring the Kamlan. Look at this. Look how sharp it is. I am really surprised. Examining the image coming out of the Kamlan at the maximum aperture of 1.1, it does produce an out of focus background, which is what is called bokeh. As you could see with this one, with my dog in the background is completely out of focus. The leaves on the ground is not very detailed, or you can't see definition in them. If you look at the next image, which is produced by the Zonlai lens at the maximum aperture of 1.4, you still see that it does produce a quality bokeh with the background being out of focus. However, because the difference in the aperture with the Zonlai picture, you could see that there is some definition to the leaves, and that's the result of the difference of 1.4 aperture to 1.1 aperture with the Kamlan. My final word on these two lenses are, while when I first got them, I really thought that the Zonlai would be the better one, and I was willing to make that sacrifice of keeping the lens with the 1.4 aperture over the 1.1. However, based on the test you just saw, that the Zonlai still needs a little bit of tweaking in order for it to produce better images. So I am gonna go with the Kamlan, and I'm gonna keep it. As far as price difference, it's only $20 between the Kamlan and the Zonlai. So it does make a lot of sense to keep the Kamlan for the $20 difference in price, and you're getting at least one extra stop of light with the aperture. Also, from a physical standpoint, while I prefer the appearance of the Zonlai lens, the Kamlan isn't that bad at all. And again, who cares about what the lens looks like on the camera if at the end of the day you're still looking at the final result, which are the pictures or the images that you produce. Hope you guys like this. If this is of value, please consider subscribing and liking our videos. Share perhaps with your friends who care for this kind of stuff. Please subscribe as I continue to do lens and camera and gear review. Thanks for watching, and you have a great day.